Hi, I'm Celia Desmond, the parliamentarian for IEEE Canada. I've asked a few volunteers to help to make a short video to illustrate some of the basic rules covered in Robert's Rules. Thank you very much to Murray McDonald, to Jeffrey Arcand, to Ahmed Rifai, who not only acted in the scenarios, but also put together a video for us. And you'll see me as the chair of the meetings as we go through, but then you'll hear me again as parliamentarian. Robert's Rules were established to enable large bodies to handle complex business expeditiously in a manner that is objective and fair to all. These rules are used extensively in IEEE at the major board levels, such as the Board of Directors, MGA, and technical activities, as well as in most society and region boards.
Celia has asked us to come up with some scenarios to demonstrate Robert's Rules of Order, particularly as applicable to our board meeting.
I'm sure we could come up with some drafts and then review and refine the presentation.
Do you think we need to use Robert's Rule for our meeting to draft these?
No, I don't think we need it for such a small meeting. We're not doing anything formally that needs to be recorded.
While it is certainly acceptable to use Robert's Rules in any IEEE meeting, small groups may choose to operate somewhat informally, foregoing the rules. However, when there is complex business to discuss, the rules are very helpful and should be used.
On screen is our consent agenda for the meeting. Are there any items that we will need to remove to discuss separately?
Mr. Chair, a point of information. On the third item on the agenda, are we discussing further nominations or voting on a submitted list of nominees?
Request for information is acceptable in order to clearly understand the business under discussion. It is not acceptable to discuss any item on the consent agenda. If discussion is desired by any member of the Assembly, that member should request to remove the item from the consent agenda. The meeting chair will then specify a logical place for the item in the action agenda. The body can then vote on the remaining consent agenda.
Okay, I move to offer the next conference to be only virtual.
Seconded.
I move to amend the motion. The amended motion is to offer the next conference in the hybrid mode.
Seconded again.
A move to amend a main motion takes precedence over the main motion. The mover should clearly specify the changes desired to the text of the main motion. The body must then vote on the amendment as long as no new proposals come forward, which will be addressed later. So the body would vote on the amendment, and after that amendment passes or fails, the body would vote on the main motion or the amended motion, depending on the outcome. Note that there can be a friendly amendment to a motion, which does not require a vote, but that can happen only before the chair reads the motion. Once the chair reads the motion and the motion has then been placed on the table, it belongs to the body and can be changed or passed only by a vote of the body.
Madam Chair, I propose an amendment to the amended motion to substitute virtual and local attendees instead of using the word hybrid.
Seconded.
Madam Chair, if I may, I'd like to propose another amendment to include the words subject to the health authorities regulations. Madam Chair, if I may, I'd like to propose a different amendment subject to the second amendment failing to include the words virtual and local attendees only subject to the health authorities regulations.
Suppose there was a concern about the wording in the primary amendment. There is an opportunity for a secondary amendment like this. This is now a secondary amendment, an amendment to the amendment. It takes precedence over the primary amendment in the same way that the primary amendment takes precedence over the main motion. The body votes first on the secondary amendment, then on the primary amendment, and finally on the main motion. 2 degrees of amendments to a main motion are allowed. The first amendment is called a primary amendment. If this amendment is then further amendment, that second amendment is called a secondary amendment. A third level of amendment is not allowed. If another change to the same information is desired, a member can propose that once the secondary amendment fails, a new secondary amendment would be made. This proposal is made while the secondary amendment is on the table to alert the body that if the secondary amendment fails, the member will make a different secondary amendment. When the secondary amendment is on the table and discussed, the body would vote on the secondary amendment. If other changes to the main motion are required outside the scope of the above amendments, separate other amendments can be proposed once the primary and secondary amendments have been handled.
Madam Chair, I think the motion addresses the desires of our younger members.
Madam Chair, I'd like to raise a question of privilege. It appears that there are a lot more discussion to be heard on this matter, and the food has been here for a while. Can we take a break for lunch and come back to this later?
The easiest way to deal with such a situation is to raise a question of privilege. A question of privilege interrupts the flow of business, and it is handled immediately. Business can continue once it has been handled. Another option could be to lay the motion under discussion on the table. This can be laid on the table in an open format or until a specific time. The motion can then be taken off the table when the meeting resumes. A third option would be to call the question, but this requires first a vote on calling the question, and if that passes, the vote is taken on the main motion before the urgent situation is dealt with. In fact, if calling the question fails, the discussion of the main motion continues. So this option does little to address the urgency.
Madam Chair, speaking in favor of the motion, I agree with the previous point that our members will not mind giving this up.
Madam Chair, I wish to speak against the motion. As was pointed out earlier, older members will likely want to keep this format.
Madam Chair, I call the question. We're cycling through the same points and should make a decision.
Seconded.
A motion to call the question, which is more correctly called previous question, is a good motion to take the matter to vote without further discussion. When seconded, the motion to call the question must be voted upon. Since the motion to call the question impacts the rights of the members at the meeting, it requires a 2/3 majority to pass, as does any motion that impacts the rights of the members. If there is already a list of members who had requested to speak when the question is called, the chair decides whether to close discussion immediately or to continue and close discussion once the existing list of speakers has been exhausted.
Madam Chair, I'm asking for a clarification. Who will be responsible to gather the health authority restriction?
If this request for information is related to the content of the item under discussion, move request for information. But if it is related to the rules of procedure, move a parliamentary inquiry.
Madam Chair, I'm speaking in favor of the main motion, but I think the current wording is missing some points.
Madam Chair, a point of order. We have an amendment proposed that we need to deal with before returning to the main motion.
Calling point of order is correct when a member sees that the rules of procedure have been breached. The point of order is handled immediately. It yields only to privileged motions, such as a motion to lay the main motion on the table. As seen in this scenario, the member calling the point of order explains the rule of the procedure that has been violated. The chair then decides on the appropriate resolution of the point of order, or if the chair is in doubt, he or she can refer the decision to the body.
Madam Chair, I agree with the previous speaker that the motion is unnecessary at this time and will only delay things.
Madam Chair, if we seem to be agreeing on the proposed motion is not needed now, I move that we postpone it indefinitely.
Seconded.
A motion to postpone indefinitely, if it passes, kills the main motion.
Madam Chair, seeing that we've covered the material on the agenda, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
When the motion passes, the meeting is still in session until the chair states the meeting is adjourned. While most bodies do use this motion to make the adjournment clear, if the time set in the agenda for adjournment has been reached, and if all the business has been completed, this motion is not even needed. It is interesting to note that there are, in fact, multiple pages of rules for adjournment discussing different scenarios. These are rarely needed in our meetings.